Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly McLemore.
All right, good evening and welcome to WSBI, your Resource for Success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly McLemore, and CEO and founder of the Women's Small Business Initiative, LLC, and award-winning author. Welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have Riana Milne. Riana Milne, MA, is a certified global life, love, trauma, recovery, and mindset coach, a CERT clinical trauma and addictions professional, a #1 best-selling author, the host of her podcast called Lessons in Life and Love, an educational speaker, and a licensed mental health counselor for over 22 years living in Palm Beach County, Florida. Recently, she was featured in Forbes magazine and Wealth Insider magazine as one of the top coaches to follow in 2022, as well as selected in 2021 as one of the 100 most successful women around the world from the Global Trade Chamber. She was also a life and dating coach for the 12-show series Radical Dating, Finding Lasting Love Over 40. Riana specializes in healing singles and couples who've had past childhood or love trauma so they can create the life they desire and have the love they deserve. So without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform, Miss Riana Milne. Hello, Riana. How are you?
Hi, Really. Thank you so much for hosting me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well,
nice to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's my pleasure. I'm excited about this conversation because we all want to talk about love. So it is
right. Number one need in human beings. That's true.
Exactly. So I cannot wait to hear about your journey and the things that you've gone through, the good, the bad, the ugly, but of course, how, others can be helped in what you do. And then, of course, any other gems you want to drop for our listeners tonight, I cannot wait to hear about it. But before we go through all of that, please tell my listeners just a little bit more about who Riana really is.
Oh, well, you've covered it pretty well. I've been a self-entrepreneur since my young 20s. For 10 years, I did have a model and talent agency in school, which won an international award for Best School of the Year. And I have 2 daughters who are married to lovely men and 6 grandchildren. I love what I do. I basically took my pain and made it into my purpose and my passion. And I'm very honored to be helping women, men, straight, and LGBTQ clients from around the world. So I love what I do. And when you're able to do that and your family is happy and healthy, then life is good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love the fact that you say you have 2 daughters, and I'm sure that they were happy. They probably were happy or not happy, saying, well, Mom, you know everything, and so here you had the opportunity to ensure that they have the great love connections that they needed to have, but giving them the tools and resources that they need. So I'm sure that was an interesting conversation.
I had those tools and I was looking for that, back in our generation, we married our college sweetheart normally, and I was only 21 when I married. Mm-hmm. So I said, please do me a favor, work on your career in your 20s, and then in late 20s, start looking for your husband. And they both did it that way, and they became very successful, both of them.
Awesome. Well, this is exactly the conversation we need to have. And like I said, I'm excited about you coming on to talk about your journey. And you mentioned in your opening that you'd had trauma. You had went through, something terrible, which you took that terribleness and made it into your passion, into something real and raw that you could share with the world. So talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you're at today.
Well, the real fact is 100% of us have childhood trauma. A lot of people don't realize it. I started talking on this when I did the research around a second husband that sabotaged his life. And because he did impulsive things he should not have been doing as a school principal, he ruined my life and my career. And I stood up for myself as my own attorney and annulled the marriage. And the last thing he said to me as he was running out of town, I don't know why I sabotage everything I love. And I said, I don't either, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's what led to me uncovering that he had 9 out of 10 top traumas that I have on my childhood trauma checklist that I developed in 2012. Mm-hmm. And from there, I started talking about childhood trauma. It is not in the DSM-4. Nobody heard about it. I actually had a pretty well-known therapist say to me, you're making this up. Nobody's heard of this. And I said, I can guarantee you I am not making this up. Mm-hmm. This is from research in family systems and psychology, but no one was talking about it. And I did not learn about it in my triple master's in psychology. I had 7 therapist friends. I'm a therapist that could not help me through. It's like a form of post-traumatic stress when you go through love trauma. And so only the research is really what helps with my healing. Mm-hmm. And so, my childhood trauma, as I was doing the research, like I said, we all have what we call big T trauma, which could be something significant, like being in a car accident or maybe losing a parent at a young age, growing up in poverty or in a dangerous area. That could be big T trauma. Little T traumas are ongoing small events that cause, emotional upset. And it tends to come out when you're an adult and especially in your love relationships. It can show up in life as anxiety, bouts of depression, fearful negative thoughts, self-doubt. It shows up in love with jealousy, people-pleasing. There's abandonment issues, perfectionism, impulse, anger issues. And then it can show up in career. By, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you go so far and then you say, well, I can't invest in that coach because I don't have the money. Mm-hmm. And you have maybe $50,000 sitting in a bank account, but you don't think you're worthy. You're afraid you might fail, right? So you don't move forward and then you never reach the level that you want to reach in success. So there's a lot of self-sabotaging when these traumas are not healed. So, I had a couple of the top 10 traumas. Like one is, I remember, asking my mom all the time, when's Dad coming home? She goes, well, I don't know where he is. Mm-hmm. And we found out later in life he was FBI and CIA. Oh, and you can't tell your family that's your job. And you can't tell them where you are. So, that's what we would call a no-fault abandonment because he was away, but that's how he supported the family. Mm-hmm. So there's things like that, that happen, and it's you learn to deal with it. But, in combination, I look at all the top traumas that my clients have, and then the severity levels, and then we go from unconscious behavioral norms to conscious awareness and break any sabotaging thoughts or habits or behaviors that don't serve you.
Wow. So you were saying earlier, too, that majority of us have gone through those traumas. What are probably the top 3 that you see consistently with all of your clientele?
Well, again, everyone's different, right? Mm-hmm. But most people I see, there's verbal messaging, which is trauma number 2. So that could be watching mom and dad yell and argue, or they might have yelled at you or not said the words, I love you, or given you compliments. They might have been doing verbal put downs or criticisms, comments like, you should change your outfit, you look fat in that. Mm-hmm. Just put downs, criticisms. And kids remember this into adulthood, Right. That's a big one. And then trauma number 7 is personal trauma. This is where you might have ever felt different or that you did not fit in. So you could have been maybe a chubby, overweight child and teased for that, or skinny and gawky. That was me. Some skinny people are called nerds, but, there's teasing around. You could have been the only African-American in an all-Caucasian school, felt different for that, or trying to come out as gay or lesbian and not accepted by your family or friends because, quote, you're different, unquote. So personal trauma is a big one. And then another one that people don't even realize is community trauma, which is part of number 9. 9 is family trauma and community trauma. So community trauma is like the COVID pandemic. So now all of us have trauma because we all have been in some way around this community trauma. That also includes our floods, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, where mass communities are wiped out. Community trauma is also our school shootings or mass shootings, things like that. And then that's tied to family trauma. So there is where you might have grown up with messages about lack. No, you can't have the new sneakers because we don't have the money. How selfish of you to ask, you know? Or I remember up in a house where my mom didn't put the heat on at night. And she goes, we don't need the heat, just use your blankets. And I was like going to bed with hats and gloves and socks because it was freezing.
Right.
You know, that's why I live in Florida now, right? So the things that we grow up with, we kind of just think are normal, really do add to who we are as people as we get older. The thing is that the Kaiser Permanente group out of San Diego did a group with 17,000 overweight people, and they equated that to childhood study, and that's where the ACE test came out. I think that was about 2015. And I looked at that and I said, wow, are they missing a lot? Because they missed abandonment. They missed bullying. They, you know, a lot of things that my work was with people of trauma constantly. I worked with students at every grade level. I was the trauma counselor. So from kindergarten all the way through college, I had kids that came from traumatic homes or were going through personal issues. I worked in a mental health ward at a hospital with those ages 5 through 19. And I worked in rehab centers with teens and women from the prison system. So despite their age, their culture, their background, childhood trauma had no prejudice. And these top 10s always kept showing up.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, just the ones that you just mentioned is pretty much, you know, the everyday thought. There's nobody that I don't know who has not gone through one of those categories and maybe all of those categories to some degree. And I think the one right now that it touches me the most when you talk a little bit more about community, and when we look at all the significant tornadoes that we just had here recently, and, you know, all of these, you know, I can't, when I seen that image on TV, my heart just dropped. And I'm sitting here thinking, how does anyone get through that? To know that literally within a matter of seconds, your life changed instantly. And then there's nothing. I mean, is just nothing there that's left. How do you handle individuals who, you know, their life has changed overnight? They're literally going through the process of, how am I going to get, you know, A, B, C, D and done, knowing I have nothing. There's just literally nothing there to hold on to. And even though obviously we know that there are people who are going to help in that process of recovery, but that's a huge change. It's not just little bits of changes. We're talking your whole life is gone in a matter of instance, so to speak, even though you're physically here. You know, how do you work with people like that?
You start with something real simple like gratitude of, wow, I'm alive. And so is my family. So you have to start with the basic gratitude, spiritual work to help with healing. One that was a big one that I helped a lot of people through in New Jersey was the devastation of 9/11, because it was like an act of war against us. And suddenly, you know, these things were happening in our cities of New York, you know. So when these events, and everyone is traumatized, you know, that's a huge community trauma. And then more people are directly impacted, you know. So it takes time to heal. I mean, as a certified clinical trauma professional and all the coursework I've done, they usually say it takes about 6 months to really overcome trauma. So when people are like devastated, even from a love trauma, when somebody has done you wrong, or narcissistic abuse or sociopathic partner, and that I define as someone who uses you for pleasure, profit, or lifestyle advancement with no remorse. When you go through something like that, you know, you're really kind of left in shock first, you know, so there's a whole process of healing that you have to go through. But it's really important that you do. A lot of people say, okay, well, I'm just going to go back out and date. And then what if somebody ghosts you or gaslights you or, you know, does something else, not healed yet? Then you're triply get devastated. Like, why does this keep happening to me? You know, and one of the most dangerous things is a lot of people fall in love due to chemistry. Mm-hmm. And this is one thing I want to say. This is one of the worst ways to fall in love with someone. That instant attraction, love bombing. It's like, oh my God, I feel this one's the right one because he gives me all this attention. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's a red flag. So you really need to know what does emotionally healthy, evolved, meaning each person is their highest and their best self, conscious love. So conscious means that person thinks before they do, say, and act. So what they do is good for themselves and the other. Mm-hmm. They're not doing things that would the other out of their own selfishness. So you're looking for someone who is emotionally healthy. So that takes time, and too many people are jumping right into intimacy. Then the brain is all turned on with phenylalanine, dopamine, serotonin, and you're suddenly attached to someone that actually ends up being the wrong partner,
right?
Or someone who devastates you. So everybody needs to just slow down. What happened to courtship, right? The old-fashioned courtship and be friends first.
Yeah,
that's the most important thing to do.
Yeah. I don't think that people even know what the word courtship means anymore. I think I've used that word 100 times, and I get the look or get that, well, what does that mean? You don't even know courtship, because you're right. People don't understand it because we live in a world that everything is instantaneous. And so, right. And we all understand that people click differently. Like you said, if you see somebody, you meet them, you feel like, oh, this is the one. And we've all been through it. We wouldn't be human if we didn't understand it, because we know these are a part of our feelings. But you find that people are more emotionally attached than they are anything else. And then when they move the emotions out is when they start to look at the reality of whether or not this person really is right for them. But, you're right. The courtship thing is out the window. People don't even understand what that means. And today the world is, let's text, let's email. I'm like, whatever happened to picking up the damn phone or just meeting in person for coffee? I'm like, where did those days go?
Yeah. That's forming a fake relationship, using online and getting someone to know you before you've even met them. You don't even really know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. I would say the first name and the last name, have a phone conversation, then meet them out. Never date long distance. You don't know who these people are. They could be married in their own town. They could be picking up their name. So get a name, look them up, see if they have a LinkedIn, or do a search service. It's worth it, to know who you're telling your information to. People really have to learn. There's a psychology and an art to dating successfully. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I teach my single clients. And for my couples, when they're round and round in this circle of fighting and they can't seem to get out of that toxic circle, then I have to work with partner A on healing their childhood traumas, partner B, and then the third entity is the relationship. And then, what is it that they keep emotionally triggering in each other and why? Then I have to teach them brand new communication skills around that. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how well it works, because they actually do become each other's best friend and support system when they're really learning to love that inner child of that person that was never nurtured, when they were young. For example, a lot of people have couples relationship issues if they had abandonment in their life. And like I said, there's fault and no fault abandonment. So the no fault could be like what I went through. A parent was gone much of the time supporting the family, or they went off to serve at war, or a parent happened to die early. Right. And a fault abandonment would be if the parent was never in that child's life, if they were there while the couple were together, then barely saw them, or the parent was there but emotionally absent, emotionally cold. They did not support the kids. They didn't go look at the kids at sports or the school plays. They were not really involved. And when there's that type of abandonment, whether it's physical or emotional, people tend to hang on too long to the toxic relationship. Mm-hmm. And they crave that love so bad that they did not get when they were younger. And their conscious mind would say, oh my gosh, I know he's no good for me.
Right,
or she.
Right.
And then the unconscious mind is, craving that love no matter what. It's saying, well, something's better than nothing, and I need and deserve this love. So
but it's not
a very
love.
Toxic. Right. Well, there's dependency, and then there's love addiction when there's a lot of abandonment. And then what we call RRS, relationship repetition syndrome. So that can be going back to the same person, and it's an average of 7 times. Going back, breaking up, going back, that cycle. Or you choose the same type of partner over and over and over again, and you can't figure out why. That's a real sign that you're stuck with unhealed trauma.
Wow. I mean, you just dropped a ton of gems there, Riana. I mean, oh my goodness. For those listeners, if you are not paying attention, you need to go back and just rewind this over and over and over, because you're right. Everybody wants to be loved, but it's those things that you go through in life is what teaches you the lessons. But a lot of times we don't listen to those lessons. We don't observe and we don't learn from them. So we're constantly going around in this wheel. And like I said, we all have done it. And that's a big part of how you learn to realize that, hey, the thing that I've been through in my trauma in my life is as an adult, it truly did not help you. And then now that you realize and you have gone that next step and you've learned from everything, you know what you are providing to other people is amazing. And I could sit here and talk to you for hours because I just learned about 10 new things. And like,
oh my
God. I'm sitting here like,
there's so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And when there's like unhealed trauma, it comes out in so many different ways, like on your physical health. Might not be sleeping well or have eating disorders or chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, just the fatigue, poor immune function. It leads to early disease like heart disease, diabetes, shorter lifespan. And then for our students, I call them my little kids because I was in the elementary school, so many kids are misdiagnosed ADHD because they can't focus. Well, I've had kids come in and it's like, my mom didn't come off the streets in Atlantic City last night, Miss Riana, so I just had to get myself to the bus. I mean, this is the type of things that kids are dealing with.
Right.
And when they're afraid, cortisol is up and memory is down. Cortisol is fight, flight, or freeze due to fear. So many kids are coming from problematic homes that they can't calm themselves enough to really learn. So I was one of those radical counselors, but I was having my students sit on the floor and meditate in year 2000 through 2004.
Wow.
Use music therapy. Louis Miguel, I don't speak Spanish, but his music's beautiful. And they come in upset, Miss Riana, we put Mr. Louis on for me,
Aww.
And then we just, through the beautiful songs, and then they would just open up and start talking about what's going on for them. So, and adults have problems with focus and finishing projects. They may study for a test and then their cortisol's so high, they're afraid, they go in and they fail. And it's like, I know this. Why did I not get it?
Right.
The cortisol spikes so much. So there's so much to know with the brain-body connection and healing the trauma out of the cells. It's really crazy. And they even showed in survivors from the Holocaust, actually gene expression changed through at least 3 generations of those that were experiencing that horrible tragedy. And then their children had different types of gene expression, like a lot of high anxiety or bouts of depression because the family lineage went through. So it's really important if you recognize this, and especially in your kids. You might have left a toxic partner, but if your kids are acting out, there's a reason for it. No kid is born a bad child, right?
Exactly.
And they don't know how to self-regulate. Their brains, they don't know what to do. So if you see your child struggling, do get them to a counselor that has trauma experience. I work with those now age 16 and up because I'm totally virtual. I don't hold an office anymore.
Okay.
And they're fine on the internet. Like my teens love this,
Right.
because it's a scary world they're growing up in. There's COVID, they don't know if they should go to college or, they just feel like, where's the hope? So we have to get them really pinned into what their dreams are and make that happen. So there's a lot of work depending on what they've been going through and what their goals and dreams are for all my clients. That's where we start.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, like I said, this conversation is amazing because we could be constantly continuing and going over all these different traumas that people go to. And a lot of times we take it kind of for granted and think, oh, well, that person's just having a bad day, or, oh, they'll get over it. And, even through myself, after going through domestic abuse, and people always ask me that question, well, how can you date again? Or how do you get up and survive every day? And it's like, how do you not? Mm-hmm. But at the same time,
right.
You try to, those triggers, when something doesn't fit right, when something isn't, spiritually, mentally, physically, all of it isn't combining together. And the biggest thing that I always try to make a lot of people who understand who've gone through this process is that you can't ignore it. And it's when you ignore it is when it becomes more of the problem.
Right. That's correct. And, I was talking to someone today in an introductory session, and I had this certain checklist, a red flag checklist. She was describing of her last boyfriend. I said, now let's look at how many traits were exactly like that of your father.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, oh my God, all of them. I said, exactly. The soul, the psyche will go back to what it knows. The brain likes homeostasis, meaning it likes what it knows.
Right.
So this is why falling in biochemistry is so dangerous. You're going back to toxic personality types just because, boom, your brain lights up. Oh, I like this person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you have to ask smarter, more intelligent questions and spend more time and really get to know who is this person in front of you, and have they worked on their own traumas? Have they done any, transformation work or study or reading or been to their own, trauma specialist?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to learn. And once you learn it, the great thing is, I describe it like a rainbow, Kimberly. You're at that point on the left side where I was. You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so how can you fix what you don't know or understand? You can't.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
So for my thing, what led me into this deep research, and then you start learning what to do. You get the education. So you're going up this high hill of the rainbow, and you're doing great, but then you're going to slip. And then you're doing well, but then you slip. And they're like, why is there slippage? Mm-hmm. Because we are really training the unconscious norms that are so ingrained that it takes a while. But once you start practicing it with all the skills that my clients learn, then they do end up on the other side, which I say is the pot of gold. And they use these skills the rest of their life. And it's so cool because I've been doing this 22 years now. And to see my clients go on and have marriages and babies and sell in business, and they came to me depressed and crying, I hate my job, or, I just got fired, I'm not successful in any jobs I do, to excelling, it's so rewarding to see how when you have this work, everything changes in your life. It's just beautiful to see it.
Right. Well, and I sit back and think about it, and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm going back and I'm reviewing the things that I read earlier. I have never met anybody who is considered a clinical trauma. So, a coach in that field. And I don't know if I would consider you rare, but I'm sure there are other ones out there, but you don't hear much about them. And I think that you're probably the most relevant coach that I've ever met and necessary, because people don't sit back and really truly deal with what it is they need to deal with. And I know after I had gone through what I went through with the domestic abuse and tried to go through counseling, the thing that frustrated me the most about the counselors was they didn't understand anything that I had been through, because that trauma wasn't something that they were used to dealing with.
Right. That's very hard. And most therapists are not they're not educators coaching is very different. Coaching for me is a very educational platform. Mm-hmm. There's much to teach. And I do a large part of the talking, and then, we work together on what's coming up for them. But in counseling, most counselors just ask, so how do you feel about that? Mm-hmm. Well, I feel lousy. That's from day one when I walked in here, and there's nothing being solved. Mm-hmm. There's no brainstorming together. There's no real solution. So people end up in therapy 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. And my client said, I learned more in 1 hour when I identified her traumas and how they're showing up in her love relationships. She goes, I've been in therapy 7 years, and I learned so much in 1 hour. because now I know what the issue is. Now let's fix it, you know,
exactly.
Because you can't fix it yourself. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where my friend, so I totally got it, because I went to 7 different people. I'm like, what's wrong with him? What does he have? Oh, I don't know. You know, it was that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde life, you know, you know, in society, he looked amazing. Then he had this whole secret life. Well, why would I attract someone like this? I don't know. You know, why didn't I see the signs? Why did I just fluff over those signs? You know, so there was a lot to get to the deep core answers that we all need if we've gone through toxic love.
Right. Wow. Oh man, we're towards the end, and I know you have to go, but I want to ask you a couple more questions before we move on and we get you out of here. But I definitely want to talk a little bit about your podcast show, and then I want to talk a little bit about the books. You have several books, 5-star rated books that you've got out there that are all #1 bestsellers. So let's just talk quickly about those, and then you know, we'll go from there.
Sure. My podcast is called Lessons in Life and Love, and I teach all kinds of lessons around this topic. How to succeed in life, love, business, for couples, for singles, for straight people, for teens, for LGBTQ. You know, it addresses all different kinds of issues for my many types of listeners. And I have 109 shows out right now, and they're on every platform, iTunes, and then my YouTube channel, Riana Milne, has the podcast plus videos. I think I have a total of 250 tapes on there. Okay. And my book, I've actually written 7 books, but the 2 that are out for the public and are part of my coaching system they're called sister books. So one is called Live Beyond Your Dreams, From Fear and Doubt to Personal Power, Purpose, and Success. And that is all about the mindset for success, how to think differently, and when your thoughts change, your life changes. So that is part of my system. And the other one is the #1 bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve. And that's 400 pages with about 350 pieces of research cut in there. And I got up to 400 pages, like, oh my God, I have to stop, but I have more, you know. So when I wrote my notebooks, and they're 150 pages, my clients, but I don't sell them. That's part of my coaching system.
Okay.
So then on my website, I do have free book chapter downloads, about 60 pages for both Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams, and free love tests. So there's 4 free love tests on there. One is a childhood trauma checklist. So you can read about all 10 of them and see what you have. I get them directly. I mark them, and I get back to everybody that does a test. And then I have a free ebook on my website, too, about how to have the love you deserve, and makes a little bit of the correlations between if you had this trauma, then you could be seeing this show up. You know, so it's a very important ebook of about 32 pages.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So lots of free reading.
Absolutely. There's no excuse. So if you cannot afford to, you know, have you on a regular basis, there's definitely enough information there for you to start reviewing and learning about who you are and how those connections are made. I mean, for free. I mean, you can't beat that. And Riana, that's fabulous. And thank you for providing that, because I'm sure that there's somebody who's going to be listening to this and realizing that, you know what, I'm having this problem and I need to figure out how to fix it. And, you know, could lead on to, you know, having that professional coach like you there to help them out, or just, you know, giving them a better life that they deserve once they really understand what they're going through. So, you know, Riana, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, we could continue to talk about this for hours, but you have definitely dropped some gems out here tonight. And I even myself have learned a lot. I'm like, oh, okay, so I know I wasn't crazy. I was going through all of this process, you know, and, you know, because sometimes people make you feel that way when you're going through something that they don't understand, you know. And so when you can have that connection of an individual who understands the clinical side as well as that personal side, you know, you've put so much of it together that it all just makes sense, because we have all gone through something in our lives, and what, depending on what you've learned from it, is going to depend on how you can move forward in your life. So again, like I said, I thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have any last words to share with our listeners this evening?
Yeah, I just want to encourage everyone that now is the time to create the life you desire and to have the love you deserve. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it's life is short and don't wait. If you're recognizing that you've had issues or high anxiety, bouts of depression, lack of focus, sadness, reach out and get some help. I have all kinds of programs at every price point. I'm very down to earth. I'm very easy to contact. I'm not one of the counselors in the sky that you can't reach. I'm very reachable, everyone. So, please, the best thing is to at least start, right? Start, Absolutely. Take the first step. I wish you all many blessings and much happiness.
All right. Again, thank you so much. And for everyone else, before we close tonight, I always love to talk about what we've learned. And basically, it's all about lessons in life and love and how all of it connects, the lessons and the things that we go through in our personal life. And so when I think about all the conversations that I have, I always talk about, how does it lead to the listeners? What are you thinking about? What lessons have you learned? What goals are you trying to reach in your personal life? If you're ready to have that conversation, reach out to me. Let's talk about those dreams. Let's talk about those next steps and how you can get those goals, put into paper, into reality. And if there's somebody I can connect you with, believe me, I will make that connection for you, because there are so many people out here who are willing to help you, and so that you can move forward and Riana just said, to live your best life, to be happy. This is what it's all about. But you can't be happy if we don't know. So get up and start thinking about what it is you want to do, why you want to do it, and start to move forward. And of course, if you want more of your resource for success, we now do accept monetary donations to support the podcast. We have a Cash App information, which will be in the DM and all the information below, or you can just go directly to the website at www.wsbillc.com, and you can also send your donations there directly. And again, I would like to thank you all for listening to us tonight. We'll be back next week with more amazing guests. Be sure to follow us on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night.
Good night, everyone. We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.